The orphanage smelled of damp wood and old blankets, the kind of smell that lingered in your hair and clothes for days. Outside, children played in the cold courtyard, their laughter brittle and uneven, but inside, two small faces pressed close together in a quiet corner, clinging to each other as if the world itself could tear them apart at any moment. The boy, barely 8, with hair too long for his thin frame, held his sister's hand tightly. Her small fingers trembled in his, eyes wide with fear. They had been inseparable since the day their parents had disappeared, but now the matron's harsh voice echoed through the hall, calling for them to be separated. Tears rolled down their cheeks as the siblings were pulled apart, each of them resisting, each of them crying out. The boy caught a glimpse of his sister as she was led down a corridor he could not follow, her tiny figure swallowed by the shadows. From that moment, their lives would stretch apart like two parallel lines that no one could bend back together. He was placed in a foster home where he learned to survive on quietness and compliance, always careful not to attract attention. He memorized routines, kept his head down, and counted the days until he might see her again, a day that never seemed to come. Meanwhile, she was sent to another orphanage across town, a place that prided itself on discipline and order. She clung to memories of her brother, the way he always shared his last piece of bread, the stories he whispered at night about adventures they would have together. She wrote letters she never sent, hiding them under the mattress, hoping that somehow, they would find him. As the years passed, the pain of separation turned into a quiet ache, one that never fully faded, though both learned to mask it behind smiles and polite words when strangers were near. In her early 20s, she found work as a technical assistant in a modest office. She handled the day-to-day operations of a small company, managing schedules, updating spreadsheets, and troubleshooting minor technical problems. It was not glamorous work, but it was honest, and she took pride in doing her job well. Her colleagues often overlooked her, seeing only the quiet, unassuming figure who moved through the office like a shadow. She never minded. She had learned long ago that life was rarely about recognition. One day, the office received a high-profile visitor, a businessman known for his brashness and arrogance, a man who built his empire by intimidating others rather than inspiring them. He strode through the office, polished shoes clicking against the tile floor, eyes scanning the staff like a hawk seeking prey. When he stopped in front of her desk, she looked up, smiling politely. His lips curled into a smirk, and he leaned forward, speaking in a tone that dripped with condescension. He mocked her simple attire, her small desk, even the way she held her pen. Colleagues stifled their laughter, some glancing down, embarrassed for her, while others were too intimidated to intervene. She swallowed her pride, her hands tightening around the pen, telling herself not to let him see the storm inside. She had faced worse than ridicule, this was just another trial. As he turned to leave, satisfied with his performance, a photograph caught his eye on a bulletin board nearby. It was a faded picture, yellowed at the edges, showing a group of children at an orphanage years ago. One boy and one girl stood out. They looked familiar, eerily familiar. He frowned, leaning closer. The boy in the photograph, standing slightly behind the others, bore a striking resemblance to someone he had once known, someone who had been important in his youth, though time had blurred the memory. He squinted at the girl, the one he had laughed at only moments ago. The realization hit him slowly, like cold water poured over his head. These children were siblings he had once admired in passing, a pair whose story had touched him long ago, though he never knew why he remembered them so vividly. The sister watched him, sensing something had changed in his demeanor. She did not understand the recognition, the sudden pause, the shift from arrogance to something more tentative. He spoke again, this time in a lower tone, almost a whisper, asking her name, her age, her history. She recounted what she could, careful with details, and gradually, fragments of memory aligned. Names, dates, orphanages, they all converged into a realization so profound that it left them both speechless. The businessman's eyes widened as he pieced together the puzzle, connecting the boy in the photograph to a young man he once knew, and the girl to the woman he had just mocked. Over the next few days, investigations ensued. Records were pulled, old letters dusted off, and slowly, a story that had been fragmented for decades began to take shape. The siblings, now adults, were finally connected by evidence, coincidence, and shared longing. When they met in a small, quiet office one afternoon. It was as though no time had passed, yet all the years of longing and pain surged at once. The sister's eyes filled with tears as she recognized the boy from her memories, the brother who had always promised to protect her, who had always been there in the shadows, even when invisible. He reached out, hesitated, and then embraced her. The years melted away in that single moment, leaving only the overwhelming emotion of reunion. The businessman, now humbled by the revelation, approached cautiously. His previous arrogance felt like a distant echo, replaced by a complicated mix of guilt and awe. He apologized for his mockery, for underestimating her, for failing to see her worth before it was too late. She accepted, though her forgiveness was tinged with the power of her regained dignity. The siblings, now reunited, shared stories of their separate childhoods, of hardships endured, of small victories won quietly in the shadows. They laughed, they cried, and for the first time in decades, they were whole. Together, they began to rebuild what had been lost. The brother, once quiet and reserved, found his voice, supporting his sister in her endeavors, helping her gain the recognition she deserved. The sister, no longer invisible, began to assert herself in the workplace, her skills and intelligence finally acknowledged. The businessman, transformed by the experience, learned that true power came not from mocking others, but from humility, respect, and the courage to see the humanity in everyone. Years later, they would look back on that day in the office, the day that began with ridicule and ended in revelation, as a turning point. The pain of separation, the anguish of lost years, had been tempered by the joy of reunion, proving that even the deepest wounds could heal with time, courage, and a little serendipity. And as they walked through the city streets together, siblings finally reunited, there was a quiet understanding between them. Life could be cruel, but it could also be astonishingly kind, delivering miracles in the most unexpected forms. They celebrated their reunion quietly at first, sharing meals and stories late into the night. Each memory, each shared joke, rebuilt the bridge between them. The brother marveled at how strong his sister had become, how gracefully she endured humiliation, how her heart had remained unbroken despite the cruelty of the world. The sister admired his resilience, his steady determination, the way he had silently protected himself and others. The businessman observed them, learning a lesson in empathy that would shape the rest of his life, realizing that true wealth was measured not in money, but in relationships, trust, and the courage to acknowledge one's mistakes. The siblings began working together on small projects, their bond a quiet but unshakable foundation. Each victory, no matter how minor, reinforced their connection. They learned to laugh at their past hardships, not in a way that dismissed the pain, but as a testament to their survival. The businessman, once a symbol of arrogance, became a mentor of sorts, guiding them in subtle ways, never overshadowing their achievements but supporting them quietly, a reminder that even flawed people could change when faced with truth. In the end, the story of separation and ridicule transformed into a tale of resilience, forgiveness, and unexpected reunion. The brother and sister, once lost to each other, found their way back through patience, fate, and unwavering hope. The lessons of childhood, long buried in pain and memory, resurfaced not as burdens but as reminders of the strength they carried within themselves. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together, united not only by blood but by the extraordinary journey that had finally brought them back to each other. This version is about 1,500 words and keeps all the drama, tension, and emotional depth flowing naturally without headings. The orphanage was a cold, gray building that loomed over the cracked courtyard like a stern, silent guardian. Its walls were faded and chipped, but inside, it carried the weight of 1,000 stories, of lives stitched together and torn apart. The air was heavy with the smell of damp blankets and disinfectant, a combination that clung to the children's clothes and hair. Among them were two small figures who refused to let the darkness seep into their hearts entirely. A boy, no more than 8, with a thin frame and a mop of unruly hair, clutched the hand of his younger sister, a girl whose wide eyes reflected both fear and hope. They had been inseparable since the day their parents vanished, leaving them to navigate a world that seemed crueler with every passing day. Their bond was everything to them. At night, they whispered dreams under tattered blankets, making promises that no adult could break but that life often tried to tear apart. "I'll find you," the boy promised, his voice trembling but firm. "No matter what, I'll find you." The girl nodded, squeezing his hand, unaware of the matron's looming shadow. That shadow, tall and imperious, swept through the room with a voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Separate them," she commanded, and suddenly, the world tilted. The boy tried to hold on to her, but strong hands pulled him backward. His sister struggled, tears streaming down her cheeks, but she was dragged in the opposite direction. Their cries collided, mingling into a single, piercing wail that echoed through the cold hallways. That was the moment their lives fractured, two halves of a whole torn apart by circumstance, each carried into a world of strangers. In the years that followed, the boy learned to survive quietly. He moved through foster homes like a shadow, never drawing attention, always keeping one eye on the future he hoped would reunite him with his sister. He became self-reliant, calculating, patient. The sister, meanwhile, endured her own trials. Her new home was strict and unyielding, with little room for childhood whimsy. Yet, she carried with her a small flame of hope, hidden beneath layers of composure. She wrote letters she never sent, leaving them tucked under mattresses or inside books, as if the universe might someday deliver them for her. She spoke of her brother, of memories so vivid they could make her smile and weep simultaneously, of the toys they had shared, the secrets they had whispered. Life had given her lessons in patience and resilience, though at a cost she could not yet measure. By her early 20s, she had carved out a life of modest independence. She worked as a technical assistant in a small office, performing tasks that demanded precision and care. She managed schedules, repaired computers, handled mundane yet vital administrative duties. Her presence was often overlooked, her quiet demeanor mistaken for simplicity. But beneath that calm exterior was a mind that never rested, a heart that had endured more than anyone could imagine. She had learned the value of silent strength, the kind that did not need applause. It was on an ordinary Tuesday morning that her life collided with arrogance. The office received an unexpected visitor, a businessman whose reputation for cruelty and hubris preceded him. He entered like a storm, polished shoes tapping against the linoleum floor, eyes scanning the employees with an almost predatory intent. He stopped abruptly at her desk, leaning over with a smirk that was both condescending and dismissive. "And what do you do here?" he asked, his tone dripping with disdain. She looked up calmly, smiling politely. "I manage the office operations," she replied softly. His laughter rang out, sharp and unkind, echoing in the silent office. "Operations? You? Surely this is some mistake," he said, his gaze sweeping over her simple attire, the neat but unremarkable desk. Colleagues glanced down, uncomfortable, while others tried to stifle laughter at her expense. She remained composed, gripping her pen with a firmness that belied her inner turmoil. Every insult he hurled was like a test, and she met each one with quiet dignity. She had faced far worse than ridicule, this was merely another obstacle, one she would navigate without losing herself. As he turned to leave, satisfied with the spectacle he had created, something caught his eye, a photograph pinned to the office bulletin board. It was old, faded at the edges, showing a group of children at an orphanage years ago. Two of them, a boy and a girl, stood out. His pulse quickened. The boy, standing slightly behind the others, looked hauntingly familiar. And the girl he had just mocked bore a striking resemblance to someone he had known long ago, someone who had mattered. His mind raced, memories colliding with reality, until the pieces aligned in a way that seemed almost impossible. The children in the photograph were siblings he had once admired from afar, though he had never known their names. The sister noticed his pause, the sudden change in his demeanor, and she instinctively knew that something had shifted. "Is there something wrong?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then leaned in, his tone almost reverent. Where did you say you grew up?" he asked. She recounted what she could, speaking slowly, carefully, aware that each detail might reveal more than she intended. Names of orphanages, years, memories of childhood games, each fragment slowly pieced together a puzzle that had lain unsolved for decades. Recognition dawned on his face, mingled with disbelief and awe. Over the next several days, a careful investigation unfolded. The businessman dug through archives, contacted old records, traced letters and documents. The siblings' identities, long obscured by time and circumstance, began to emerge with startling clarity. When the siblings finally met, It was in a quiet office, away from prying eyes. The sister, standing rigid with emotion, barely recognized the man before her, the boy she had once held hands with, now grown into a calm, steady presence. The brother approached, cautiously, his eyes scanning her face for signs of the girl he remembered. Then, slowly, recognition settled in. Tears welled up, memories of shared laughter and whispered dreams flooding back with an intensity neither could contain. They embraced, the years of separation dissolving in the warmth of a long-awaited reunion. The businessman, transformed by the revelation, stepped forward, his arrogance replaced by humility. I should not have mocked you, he admitted, his voice shaking slightly. I see now how wrong I was. You are stronger than I could have imagined. She accepted his apology, a quiet smile breaking through the tears, the power of her regained dignity shining in her eyes. They spoke of the past, of the hardships endured, the moments of hope clinging to them like fragile threads. They laughed and cried, sometimes in the same breath, finally reconnecting the threads of lives that had been torn apart. As the siblings began to rebuild their lives, they discovered strengths in each other they had not anticipated. The brother, once reserved and cautious, found a voice that complemented his sister's quiet intelligence. The sister, no longer invisible, asserted herself in her work, her capabilities finally recognized and valued. The businessman, humbled and changed, became a mentor of sorts, guiding them without overshadowing their achievements. He learned that true power came not from dominance, but from empathy, humility, and the courage to recognize one's own mistakes. They celebrated their reunion quietly at first, savoring the moments that had eluded them for years. Meals were shared late into the night, conversations stretching into early mornings. They recounted stories of childhood, of small victories and defeats, of fears and triumphs. The brother marveled at his sister's strength, her resilience in the face of humiliation and hardship. She admired his determination, the quiet way he had navigated a harsh world without losing his sense of self. Together, they began to plan a future not defined by the traumas of their past, but by the possibilities of what they could create together. As weeks turned into months, their bond deepened. They took on small projects together, using their complementary strengths to achieve success in ways neither could have accomplished alone. Each victory, no matter how minor, was a testament to their resilience and shared history. The businessman, once a symbol of arrogance, became a quiet presence in their lives, offering guidance, insight, and support, a reminder that people could change when confronted with the truth. The siblings also began reaching out to others who had been affected by the orphanage system, sharing their story as a beacon of hope. They discovered that their experience, though painful, could inspire and heal others. The lessons of childhood, once sources of sorrow, became tools of empathy and understanding. They saw how resilience, hope, and love could flourish even in the most challenging circumstances. Years later, they would reflect on the day the businessman had walked into their office, mocking and dismissive. What had begun as humiliation became the catalyst for reunion, understanding, and growth. They realized that life's cruelty often carries within it the seeds of unexpected kindness, that separation and hardship can be transformed into opportunities for connection and redemption. The siblings' journey was a testament to the enduring strength of family, the power of forgiveness, and the extraordinary ways in which fate can intervene. Together, they walked through the city streets, finally whole, each step a quiet celebration of survival and reunion. They had faced pain, injustice, and misunderstanding, yet emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. Their past, once a series of fractures and losses, had become a foundation for love, resilience, and triumph. And as they looked ahead, hand in hand, they understood that whatever challenges lay in wait, they would face them together, fortified by the bond that had survived time, distance, and life itself. The sister's career flourished. She became known for her intelligence, her meticulous attention to detail, and the quiet authority she commanded without ever raising her voice. The brother, once timid and cautious, became her anchor, offering guidance, support, and unwavering loyalty. Their collaboration became a model of trust and mutual respect, a symbol of what could be achieved when hearts were united by love and understanding rather than circumstance. The businessman, observing their growth, reflected often on the lessons he had learned. Arrogance, he realized, was a fleeting illusion. True strength lay in humility, in the courage to recognize one's mistakes, and in the ability to value the potential of others. His transformation, though subtle, was profound, altering the way he approached life, business, and relationships. He had entered the story as a symbol of mockery, yet departed as a testament to redemption. In the quiet moments, the siblings sometimes revisited their childhood memories, the games played in the orphanage courtyard, the whispered promises under the blankets, the longing for each other that had never faded. These recollections, once sources of pain, became threads that wove together the fabric of their renewed lives. The past was no longer a burden but a guiding light, illuminating the strength they carried and the love that had never truly been lost. Even as life moved forward, they remained connected, their bond unbroken by time or circumstance. They celebrated birthdays, shared milestones, and supported each other through challenges and triumphs alike. Their story, though marked by loss and hardship, was ultimately one of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of family. They had discovered that no obstacle was insurmountable, no separation permanent, and that the heart's capacity for love and forgiveness was limitless. The orphanage stood at the edge of town, a gray, looming building that seemed to absorb the sunlight, casting long shadows over the cracked courtyard. Its walls were weathered, peeling in places, carrying decades of memories that were as harsh as they were silent. The smell inside was a mix of damp blankets, old wood, and disinfectant, a scent that clung to the hair and clothes of the children long after they left. Among them, two small figures clung to each other as if holding on to life itself. A boy, thin and small, with dark hair falling into his eyes, held tightly to his younger sister's hand. Her tiny fingers wrapped around his with a strength that belied her age. They had been inseparable since their parents disappeared without explanation, leaving them in a world that felt suddenly and cruelly empty. At night, they whispered their dreams under threadbare blankets, their voices small but fierce. "I'll find you," the boy promised one evening, his voice shaking but resolute. "No matter what, I'll find you." The girl nodded, her eyes wide with hope and fear. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise me you'll come back for me." Their fingers intertwined, holding on to each other as if the world could not tear them apart. But the orphanage matron, tall and imposing, did not see love and hope in those small hands. She saw disorder, distraction, a lack of obedience. Her voice sliced through the room, sharp as a whip. "Separate them," she commanded. The boy tried to hold his sister, but strong arms forced him backward. She struggled, shrieking, her small frame writhing against the grip of strangers. Their cries merged, a single, piercing sound that echoed down the cold hallways, filling the building with anguish. The last thing the boy saw before he was pulled away was his sister's tiny figure disappearing into the shadows, her tears glinting like diamonds in the dim light. That was the moment their lives fractured, the day their bond was violently severed, leaving two halves of a whole to navigate the world alone. He was placed in a series of foster homes, each more indifferent than the last. Some were harsh, some neglectful, and some simply too overwhelmed to notice a quiet boy who avoided trouble and never spoke of home. He learned to survive silently, moving like a shadow through life, keeping one eye always on the hope that one day he might find her again. Meanwhile, she endured her own struggles, living in a distant orphanage with strict rules and little compassion. She clung to memories of her brother, small fragments of time that felt like treasures. She wrote letters she never sent, hiding them in old books and under mattresses, as if the universe would someday deliver them for her. Each day brought its own trials, but she nurtured a quiet strength, one that carried her forward even when despair threatened to engulf her. By the time she was in her early 20s, she had carved out a modest but stable life. She worked as a technical assistant in a small office, managing schedules, handling minor computer repairs, updating spreadsheets, and keeping the office running smoothly. Her presence was quiet, her demeanor unassuming. Many overlooked her, mistaking her calm for simplicity, never realizing the depth of intelligence and resilience that lay beneath. She had learned long ago that life rarely rewarded loud voices and flashy displays, but those who endured quietly often found their own victories. It was on an ordinary morning that her life shifted in ways she could not have anticipated. The office buzzed with activity when a tall, polished man entered. His shoes clicked sharply against the tile floor, his gaze sweeping the employees with the precision of someone who believed the world existed to serve him. The businessman was infamous for his arrogance, a man who had built an empire on intimidation rather than inspiration. He stopped abruptly at her desk, leaning forward with a condescending smile. "And what is it you do here?" he asked, voice sharp, mocking. She looked up, her calm smile unwavering. "I manage office operations," she replied softly. His laughter was sudden, almost cruel, echoing in the office like a clap of thunder. "Operations? Surely you jest," he sneered, sweeping his gaze over her simple attire, her modest desk. Colleagues shifted uncomfortably, some embarrassed, others too intimidated to intervene. She gripped her pen tightly, forcing herself to remain composed. Every word he spoke felt like a test, one she was determined to pass with dignity. "Do you actually understand how a business works?" he asked, his tone dripping with contempt. "You sit here typing on your little machine, pretending you're important. Tell me, do you even know who I am?" She met his eyes steadily, answering simply, "I know enough to do my job well." His smirk faltered for a moment, replaced by curiosity tinged with incredulity. As he turned to leave, something on the wall caught his attention, a faded photograph, pinned crookedly to the bulletin board. It showed a group of children at an orphanage decades ago, faces smiling in a mix of innocence and mischief. Two of them, a boy and a girl, stood apart from the others, as if fate had already marked them for something extraordinary. He froze, recognition creeping slowly through his mind. The boy in the photograph looked hauntingly familiar, and the girl he had just mocked looked like someone he had known long ago, someone who had mattered in a way he hadn't understood until now. His pulse quickened, his mind racing to connect fragments of memory with the present. The sister noticed the shift in his demeanor, the sudden hesitation, and instinctively understood that something was different. "Is there something wrong?" she asked quietly. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Where did you grow up?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. She answered cautiously, recounting her childhood, the orphanage, the years of waiting, the small pieces of a past she had tried to forget but never could. Names, places, dates, all flowed from her lips, each word bringing clarity to a mystery that had stretched across decades. Recognition dawned slowly, like the sun rising over a misty landscape. He realized the boy in the photograph, the one he had admired in passing as a child, was the brother he had never forgotten, and the girl before him was the sister who had endured the world silently, unbroken. The realization was almost too much to bear. He stepped back, his arrogance gone, replaced by awe and disbelief. The office seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them suspended in a moment where time itself felt fragile. In the days that followed, the businessman began a careful investigation. Records were pulled, letters examined, old photographs dusted off. Slowly, the story of the siblings, separation and endurance emerged, each piece confirming what their hearts already suspected. When they were finally brought together in a quiet room, away from prying eyes, it was as though the years melted away. The sister, standing rigid with emotion, barely recognized the man before her, the boy she had held hands with in the orphanage, now grown into a calm, steady figure. The brother approached with cautious hope, scanning her face for the girl he remembered. Then, recognition settled fully. Tears spilled over, unbidden, as memories of whispered dreams, shared bread, and promises long unkept flooded back. They embraced, and the years of separation collapsed into the warmth of reunion. The businessman watched silently, his arrogance replaced by humility. I shouldn't have mocked you," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I see now. I was wrong. You are stronger than I ever imagined." She accepted the apology with a soft nod, the power of her regained dignity shining through. They spoke for hours afterward, recounting lost memories, hardships endured, small victories claimed in silence. They laughed, sometimes cried, often did both at once, rebuilding the bridge between their fragmented pasts. The siblings began to rebuild their lives together. The brother, once quiet and cautious, found his voice, supporting his sister as she asserted herself professionally. The sister, now visible in the workplace, gained recognition for her skill, her intelligence, her meticulous attention to detail. The businessman, transformed by the revelation, became a quiet mentor, offering guidance without overshadowing their achievements. He learned that true strength and success were measured not in dominance, but in empathy, humility, and the courage to acknowledge one's own mistakes. They celebrated their reunion quietly at first, savoring the small, intimate moments they had long been denied. Meals stretched into late evenings, conversations stretched into early mornings, filled with laughter, tears, and the occasional long silence where words failed but hearts spoke volumes. The brother marveled at his sister's resilience, the grace with which she endured humiliation and hardship. She admired his steadiness, the quiet way he had navigated a harsh world without losing his sense of self. Together, they began to plan a future defined not by the traumas of their past, but by the potential they could create together. As months passed, their bond deepened. They undertook projects together, relying on each other's strengths, celebrating every success no matter how small. Each victory was a testament to resilience and shared history, each challenge a reminder that together they could overcome anything. The businessman, once a symbol of mockery, remained a subtle but guiding presence, his transformation a quiet reminder that people could change when confronted with truth and compassion. They also reached outward, helping others who had endured orphanages, foster care, or separation. Their story, though born of pain, became a beacon of hope, showing that resilience, patience, and love could triumph even against great odds. The lessons of childhood, once a source of sorrow, became tools of empathy and understanding, a foundation on which they built new lives. Years later, they reflected on the day the businessman had first mocked her in the office. What had begun as humiliation became the catalyst for reunion, understanding, and personal growth. They understood that life's cruelty often hid unexpected kindness, that separation and hardship could be transformed into connection and redemption. The siblings' journey was a testament to the enduring power of family, the strength of forgiveness, and the extraordinary ways fate could intervene. Together, they walked through city streets, finally whole, each step a quiet celebration of survival, reunion, and the enduring bonds of love. The sister's career flourished. Her intelligence, skill, and quiet authority gained recognition she had never dared to expect. The brother, once reserved, became her anchor, offering guidance, support, and unwavering loyalty. Their collaboration became a symbol of trust, love, and mutual respect. The businessman, observing them, reflected on the lessons he had learned, realizing that true power lay in humility, empathy, and the courage to see the humanity in others. Even in quiet moments, they revisited memories of their childhood, the games played in the orphanage courtyard, whispered promises under blankets, the longing for each other that never faded. Those memories, once sources of pain, became threads that wove the fabric of their renewed lives. The past, no longer a burden, became a guiding light illuminating their resilience and capacity for love. Life moved forward, but they remained inseparable. Birthdays, milestones, challenges, and triumphs were shared. Their story, marked by loss, separation, and hardship, was ultimately one of hope, endurance, and reunion. They discovered that no obstacle was insurmountable, no separation permanent, and that the heart's capacity for love, forgiveness, and endurance was boundless. Together, they built a life shaped by their past but not limited by it. Every achievement, every act of kindness, every moment of laughter or quiet reflection was proof that they had survived, endured, and triumphed. The siblings, once lost to each other, had found a way back, and in doing so, discovered the extraordinary power of family, love, and resilience. The orphanage loomed at the edge of town like a silent sentinel, gray and unwelcoming, its walls scarred by time and neglect. The courtyard was cracked and uneven, a place where children played in patches of sunlight that managed to pierce the grim sky. Inside, the air smelled of damp blankets, old wood, and disinfectant, a scent that lingered long after one had left. Among the children were two small figures who clung to each other as if survival depended on their bond. A boy, slight and thin, with dark hair falling into his eyes, held the hand of his younger sister, her small fingers intertwining with his in a desperate grip. They had been inseparable since the day their parents vanished, leaving them to navigate a world that seemed suddenly cruel and incomprehensible. At night, under the thin threadbare blankets of the orphanage, they whispered their dreams and fears. "I'll find you," the boy promised one evening, his voice trembling but resolute. "No matter what happens, I will come back for you." The girl's eyes shimmered with hope and fear. "Promise me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Promise me you'll never forget me. Their fingers were tightly interlaced, holding onto one another as if the world itself could not tear them apart. But the orphanage matron, tall and imperious, did not see hope or love in their hands. She saw disorder, distraction, and disobedience. Her voice cut through the quiet like a blade. Separate them, she commanded. The boy tried to resist, clutching his sister's hand even tighter, but strong arms pried him away. She struggled and cried, her voice mingling with his in a single wail of anguish that filled the hallway. The last thing he saw before being pulled away was her small figure disappearing into the shadows, tears glinting like shards of glass in the dim light. That moment became the fracture that defined the rest of their lives, separating two halves of a whole and sending them into different paths of survival. The boy was placed in a series of foster homes, each more indifferent than the last. Some were harsh, others neglectful, and a few simply overwhelmed by the task of caring for children. He learned to navigate each environment with silence and caution, never attracting attention, always observing, always waiting. He memorized routines, calculated the right words and actions, and kept a quiet hope alive that one day he would find his sister. Meanwhile, she endured her own struggles in a distant orphanage, a place ruled by strict rules and unyielding authority. She clung to memories of her brother, small fragments of a past that had become treasures she would not let go of. She wrote letters she never sent, hiding them under mattresses or inside books, imagining that someday, someone would deliver them. The flame of hope in her chest never died, though life tried repeatedly to snuff it out. By her early 20s, she had created a modest life for herself. She worked as a technical assistant in a small office, managing schedules, repairing computers, and performing the tasks that kept the company functioning. Her presence was quiet and unassuming, often overlooked by colleagues who mistook her calm demeanor for simplicity. But beneath her composed exterior was intelligence, resilience, and a strength forged by years of hardship. She had learned long ago that life rarely rewarded those who shouted or demanded attention. Often, the quiet and patient ones were the survivors. On an ordinary Tuesday, her life shifted in ways she could not have anticipated. The office buzzed with activity when a tall, impeccably dressed man entered, his shoes clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. His gaze swept over the employees, assessing, judging, and asserting dominance without a word. He was a businessman notorious for arrogance and cruelty, a man who had built his empire on intimidation rather than collaboration. He stopped abruptly at her desk, leaning over with a smirk. "And what is it you do here?" he asked, his tone condescending. She looked up at him calmly, her lips curving into a polite smile. "I manage office operations," she replied softly. His laugh rang out suddenly, sharp and almost cruel, echoing in the quiet office. "Operations? Surely you jest," he said, sweeping his gaze over her simple attire, her modest desk. Colleagues shifted uneasily, some embarrassed, others too intimidated to intervene. She gripped her pen tightly, forcing herself to remain composed. Every word he uttered felt like a test, one she would meet with quiet dignity. "Do you even understand how a business works?" he sneered. "You sit here typing, pretending you matter. Tell me, do you know who I am?" She met his gaze steadily. "I know enough to do my job well," she said simply. His smirk faltered slightly, replaced by curiosity tinged with disbelief. As he turned to leave, a faded photograph pinned to the office bulletin board caught his attention. It was yellowed with age, showing a group of children at an orphanage decades ago. Two of them stood apart, a boy and a girl, small and seemingly insignificant among the crowd, but their presence was strangely familiar. Recognition crept slowly through him, unsettling and intense. The boy in the photograph looked hauntingly like someone he had known long ago. The girl, she bore a striking resemblance to the woman he had just mocked. His pulse quickened. Memories collided with reality, forcing fragments of the past into a sharp, unbearable clarity. The sister noticed the sudden change in his demeanor. "Is there something wrong?" she asked softly. He leaned closer, his voice low and trembling with uncertainty. Where did you grow up?" he asked. She recounted her childhood, the orphanage, the years of waiting, the small glimpses of her brother that had never faded. Names, dates, places, each detail seemed to fall into place, forming a mosaic of the past. Recognition dawned slowly, like sunlight filtering through fog. He realized the boy in the photograph, the one he had admired from afar as a child, was the brother he had never forgotten, and the woman before him was the sister who had endured the world silently, unbroken. The office faded around them, leaving only the two of them suspended in a moment where time itself seemed fragile. In the days that followed, the businessman began to investigate, pulling old records, contacting orphanages, and piecing together decades-old letters and photographs. The siblings' identities, long obscured by time and circumstance, began to emerge with startling clarity. When they were finally brought together in a quiet room, away from the office and prying eyes, the years collapsed. The sister, standing rigid with emotion, barely recognized the man before her, the boy she had once held hands with, now grown into a calm, composed adult. The brother approached cautiously, scanning her face for signs of the girl he remembered. Then, recognition settled fully. Tears streamed freely, memories of whispered dreams, shared bread, and promises long unkept flooding back. They embraced, letting decades of separation and longing dissolve in that single, overwhelming moment. The businessman, now humbled, watched silently. I should not have mocked you, he admitted, his voice low. I see now. I was wrong. You are stronger than I ever imagined. She accepted his apology with a quiet nod, her dignity intact, her resilience shining through. They spoke for hours afterward, recounting lost memories, hardships endured, small victories claimed in silence. They laughed and cried in the same breath, rebuilding the bridge between the fragments of their past. The siblings began to rebuild their lives together. The brother, once quiet and cautious, found his voice, supporting his sister as she asserted herself professionally. The sister, now visible in her workplace, gained recognition for her intelligence, skill, and meticulous attention to detail. The businessman, transformed by the revelation, became a quiet mentor, offering guidance without overshadowing their achievements. He learned that true power and success were measured not in dominance, but in empathy, humility, and the courage to acknowledge one's own mistakes. Their reunion was celebrated quietly at first, savoring small, intimate moments that had been denied to them for so long. Meals stretched into evenings, conversations into early mornings, filled with laughter, tears, and moments where silence spoke more than words. The brother marveled at his sister's resilience, at the grace with which she endured humiliation and hardship. She admired his steadiness, the quiet way he had navigated a harsh world without losing his sense of self. Together, they began to plan a future not defined by the traumas of their past, but by the possibilities of what they could create together. As months passed, their bond deepened further. They undertook projects together, combining their skills, celebrating every success no matter how small. Each victory became a testament to resilience and shared history, each challenge a reminder that together they could overcome anything. The businessman, once a symbol of arrogance, remained a subtle guiding presence, a living reminder that people could change when confronted with truth and compassion. They reached out to others affected by orphanages, foster care, or separation, using their story as a beacon of hope. Their journey, though born from pain, became a testament to the power of resilience, patience, and love. The lessons of childhood, once sources of sorrow, were transformed into tools of empathy and understanding, a foundation on which they built new lives. Years later, they would reflect on the day the businessman had first mocked her. What had begun as humiliation became the catalyst for reunion, understanding, and growth. They realized life's cruelty often hides unexpected kindness, that separation and hardship can transform into connection and redemption. The siblings' journey became a testament to the enduring power of family, the strength of forgiveness, and the extraordinary ways fate intervenes. Together, they walked through city streets, finally whole, each step a quiet celebration of survival, reunion, and the enduring bonds of love. The sister's career flourished. Her intelligence, skill, and quiet authority gained recognition she had never dared to imagine. The brother, once timid, became her anchor, offering guidance, support, and unwavering loyalty. Their collaboration became a symbol of trust, love, and mutual respect. The businessman, observing them, reflected on the lessons he had learned, realizing that true power lay in humility, empathy, and the courage to see the humanity in others. Even in quiet moments, they revisited childhood memories, the games played in the orphanage courtyard, whispered promises under blankets, the longing for one another that never faded. Those memories, once sources of pain, became threads that wove the fabric of their renewed lives. The past, no longer a burden, became a guiding light illuminating their resilience and capacity for love. Life moved forward, but they remained inseparable. Birthdays, milestones, challenges, and triumphs were shared. Their story, marked by loss, separation, and hardship, was ultimately one of hope, endurance, and reunion. They discovered that no obstacle was insurmountable, no separation permanent, and that the heart's capacity for love, forgiveness, and endurance was limitless. Together, they built a life shaped by their past but not limited by it. Every achievement, every act of kindness, every moment of laughter or quiet reflection was proof that they had survived, endured, and triumphed. The siblings, once lost to each other, had found a way back, and in doing so, discovered the extraordinary power of family, love, and resilience.